The Braves drop game 2 of the World Series to the Houston Astros by a score of 7-2. Not the best game overall. Pretty much a reverse of what we saw in game 1, but the Braves do split the 2 games in Houston and come back home to Atlanta for game 3. We'll be talking about all of that from game 2 on this podcast, breaking down Max Fried's start, the offensive struggles, talking about the bullpen as well, and what to look forward to going forward in this series. So let's
Hey, this is Stacey Gotsoulias,
DC Lundberg,
Ryan Finkelstein,
Taylor Blake Ward,
host of Locked On Yankees,
Locked On Mariners,
Locked On Mets,
Locked On Angels,
and you're listening to Locked On Braves.
Locked On Braves,
Locked On Braves,
part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, where we talk about your favorite teams every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall. Check out my bio there to see everywhere I am covering the game of baseball, including the Atlanta Braves over at TomahawkTake.com. Also, make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. And subscribe to Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And please, if you're listening to this, go to YouTube right now and subscribe to the Locked On Braves channel, starting that up for this World Series. Really trying to get that going. So please stop what you're doing, pause the podcast, go on over to YouTube, and please give us a subscription there. And thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Just as a reminder, we post episodes daily, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and we are free and available on all platforms. But on today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the Game 2 loss to the Houston Astros. Really just a bummer of a game, honestly. Not a lot going well for the Braves in this one, but we'll break it down. Max Fried's start. We'll talk about the rest of the bullpen as well. Thought there were some key things to take away from that. I'll talk about the defensive miscues and the offensive struggles, not able to punch back in this game. But let's start just looking at the game overall. I mean, like I said at the top, this is pretty much a reverse of game 1. You had the Astros get out to an early lead and really just never relinquish it. The game was really never in jeopardy after the second inning. So it made it kind of a boring game, obviously from a Braves standpoint. But just as a baseball fan as well, not a lot to get excited about in this one. Had to be the way the Astros fans felt about game 1. But the Houston was pretty much in control of this one from beginning to end. So again, pretty much just a reverse. These two games are mirror images of each other, with one team doing it in game 1 and the other team doing it in game 2. But like I said, the Braves split these two games and now go back to Atlanta for game 3. Got 3 in a row in Atlanta. The Braves will be looking to do more good work there as they have this postseason. But let's jump into the pitching side of things first from game 2. You had Max Fried on the mound. I talked about it in my preview episode. This is a game on paper that should have heavily favored the Atlanta Braves. You have your best starter on the mound in Max Fried against a guy who got lit up his last time out in the postseason. But that's why I picked the Astros, because baseball is crazy, and what is supposed to happen seemingly never does, especially in the postseason. And that's what we saw happen. Max Fried just didn't have it early, really just in the first inning. I thought he got hit pretty hard in that first inning. The second inning is more so just a little bit of bad luck. I mean, he still wasn't locating his pitches all that great. But, just had some balls that snuck through the infield. They beat the shift there, which is something that needs to be discussed. I get it. The Braves kind of turned things around when they started shifting a lot more. But, as the Fox crew has talked about, in the postseason, you're seeing hitters take a different approach, especially in 2-strike counts. The hit from Gurriel, where he took a slider inside and kind of just fisted it the other way, is a good example of that in this game. So I think the Braves have to, adjust their shifts a little bit, which they've done throughout this postseason. But I think you got to try to play it a little bit more straight up with these Astros hitters, because they're all really good hitters up and down the lineup. And we've seen the defensive shifts really bite the Braves early on in this series. So something to keep an eye on there. See if the Braves kind of make an adjustment to that going into the rest of this series. But again, that second inning just they had some balls that snuck through. And then the Jose Siri one, I mean, just a dribbler, kind of similar to what Jorge Soler had in game one when he got on, and that led to a Braves run. But Siri gets down the line, I mean, just ridiculously fast. That was a big point in that game because of what happened after it. We're going to talk about the defense in this game a little later on. But, that just kind of snowballed. The inning got away from Fried there, ends up giving up 4 runs in that inning. And like I said, that was pretty much the game at that point, just like it was in game one when the Braves went up 5-0 after the first 3 innings. What I did think was impressive about Max was that he settled down, kind of got into a rhythm in this game, was able to go 3 more innings after that second inning. Again, really calmed down, seemed to be in much better rhythm, felt, looked more confident on the mound, more sure of himself. He ended up going 5 innings, gave up 6 runs on 7 hits, 1 walk, and 6 strikeouts. I'm showing that Fried was charged with all of those runs, but honestly, I mean, at least 2 of those I think were unearned. So I think the number's a little bit better probably than what they showed for Max Fried. I mean, he wasn't great in this game, especially early on. But again, he really settled down at one point in the game, struck out 10 batters in the row. Again, really seemed to get in the rhythm that we're used to seeing for Max Fried. So I thought that was really big for a couple of reasons. One of which it kept the team in the game. I mean, even though they were down 5-1 early because you had the home run from Adam Duvall early in the game as well. But it gave the offense a chance to come back. And again, we'll talk about the offense more later on as well. But, he gave the team a chance. And he also gave Snitker some innings. I mean, it would have been pretty bad if Snitker had to pull him there in that second inning, or if things continued to get out of control and he had to take him out in the third or fourth. But good job by Max to battle back. Even brought him back out for the 6th, which, some people could question that. But I thought it was the right decision because it was still still a 5-2 game at that point. It was still a close ball game, and Max Fried was rolling. Unfortunately, walked the leadoff batter in that 6th and then gave up a single before getting pulled. And one of those runs came around to score, but shouldn't have. I thought Fried did well in settling down after those first 2 innings, giving the team some length to save the bullpen. So really, there's 3 good things out of this. One of which is he kept the offense of the game. The other is he saved the bullpen from being overworked. And the third thing is I think this has to give Fried some momentum going into his next start, which will probably be game 6 back in Houston, depending on how the rest of the series goes. Maybe Snitker decides to bring him back in game 5 on short rest. I kind of doubt that, but could be a possibility in this one. But Fried threw 86 pitches in this one. So, I mean, he could come back on 3 days rest. I know Snitker would like to try to avoid that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that by Fried getting on a roll, retiring 10 batters in a row, I think that gives him a little bit more confidence going into his next start, knowing the pace he needs to pitch at. We saw him kind of out of rhythm in LA as well in his last start there. I think he started to find that pace a little bit, find out what was working against these Astros hitters. So at the very least, I think he comes out of this start feeling a lot more confident going into his next start in this series. Looking at the rest of the game, I talked about that 6th inning where the first 2 batters got on against Max Fried. And then Snitker goes to Dylan Lee, the first guy that he calls out of the bullpen. That was an odd choice for me because, like I said, it was still a 5-2 game at that point, still a very winnable game. I mean, I understand not going to one of the big 3 lefties there and Minter and Batsick and Smith. Obviously, Minter wasn't going to pitch and Smith wasn't going to pitch unless they were winning in the 9th. So, I can understand not going to Matzik or Luke there to try to keep the game close. But Dylan Lee seemed like the odd choice. And, I mean, honestly, he pitched pretty well. He should have gotten out of that inning without giving up anything else. So, credit to him, but the Astros are able to tack on another run there, and that felt like a big run at the time, made it a 6-2 game. But good to see at least Dylan Lee get some work. And like I said, he really pitched pretty good and should have gotten out of that jam. But then came Smiley, and this was kind of Lee was the beginning of the white flag for me, but Smiley coming in was definitely the white flag. I don't like Drew Smiley in this matchup against the Astros. I get that he was huge for the Braves against the Dodgers in the NLCS, but the Dodgers were clearly struggling against lefties, particularly lefties with good curveballs, which is what Smiley features the most and has the best of is his curveball. That's not the same thing with this Astros team. This Astros team has some really good right-handed hitters. They're not afraid of that curveball, and he comes right into the game and gives up a home run to Altuve, which, them scoring that one run in the sixth, wasn't enough. The Altuve home run definitely did that. What I did love was Kyle Wright getting into this game, and I think it's something I mentioned on the preview podcast, but either way, I thought it made a lot of sense to get Kyle Wright into this game. Hasn't pitched in a long time, and you're probably going to need meaningful outs from him in games 4 and 5. So I love the idea of getting his feet wet in a blowout game like this, the perfect opportunity to do that. And he was the best pitcher of the night. I mean, struck out the side in the bottom of the 8th. I wouldn't read too much into that. I mean, the game was essentially over at that point. So, it's not like it was a high leverage spot, but it was great to see Kyle Wright get in there and have some, good feelings because it was a great outing. I mean, he was throwing the ball well. There was no fluke about that. He was dotting the ball down and away, just really locating all of his pitches, filling up the strike zone. So there was no fluke about his effort in this game, but I just wouldn't read too much into it thinking that he's going to give you, 5 shutout innings in game 4 or 5. But either way, a great outing for Wright. Glad to see him get out there, get some action so that, he gets a feeling of this series and what it takes to get some of these hitters out. So I think that's going to be big for him going forward. And one of the advantages of a blowout is, Snicker didn't have to use his best relievers in this game. He was able to avoid the big 3 in the back end. So that's biggest too. You never want to get blown out, but it does come with that added advantage. This episode is also brought to you by our friends at rockauto.com. There are so many different makes and models of automobiles these days. It's impossible to stock all the parts your car will ever need in your traditional chain store. So I worry with the hassle of answering a bunch of questions about your car at a chain store and just hoping they have the parts you need when you have the inventory of rockauto.com right there in your pocket. You can pull them up on your cell phone, find any make and model of any kind of auto part that your car will need. There are so many different reasons to maintain your automobile these days, but the biggest one is obviously to save money. Why would you choose to spend 30, 50, sometimes even 100% more for the exact same auto part at a chain store or new car dealership? They have everything you need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. So go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your vehicle, and do us a favor, write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. All right, so I wanted to talk about what I think is the biggest takeaway from game 2 for the Braves, and that is the defense. It was just honestly terrible in this game. I talked about the defensive shifts, and that's part of it. And this has really been an issue for me for a while now with this Braves team. Ever since they started going into this shift, they have been terrible at turning double plays. And I think they turned like the fewest double plays in all of baseball this year. I mean, there was back-to-back plays in the 6th inning when Dylan Lee came in where they had an opportunity to turn a double play and get out of the inning. The first one, Ozzie kind of threw it wide of second base, kind of pulled Dansby off the bag, and he just had to take the out. The other one was hit to Dansby, and he threw it to Ozzie, and Ozzie just missed it on the turn and didn't get anybody out. And so that allowed a score to run. It also allowed the inning to continue. Again, that should have ended the inning. It was a pretty easy double play opportunity. So that was more just uncharacteristic of Ozzie just not being able to make that turn. But I think a lot of it has to do with the defensive positioning because it's been a problem all year long with them trying to turn double plays. So I don't know what you do to fix that. I mean, the shift is good for some things. It'll bite you the next day. I'm not the biggest believer in it, but I definitely think that's had an effect on their double play combination this year. But also just some like uncharacteristic things like nobody being at third base on that ball that Martin Maldonado hit, which why we're giving up hits to Martin Maldonado, but nobody at third base. And then Dansby doesn't catch it. We still throw it at third, even though nobody's there. And it goes right by Dansby, goes to the backstop, another run scores. That was a big play in this game as things were just starting to unravel there. So just some really, again, bad plays defensively in this game that you don't normally see from the Braves. You had a pass ball by d'Arnaud in this one, and he's been really good at blocking balls. Certainly not putting a lot of heat on d'Arnaud here, but just the fact that there were several of those plays in this game that the Braves didn't make that they normally do. So that was, really key in this game, in this matchup, just some plays that they weren't able to make, and it really cost them in this. So not something that I think will continue going forward, but it was definitely a big part of the Braves losing this game. Take one more break, and then we'll come back and talk about the offense or lack thereof from the Braves in Game 2. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. You got the MLB postseason World Series going on with your Atlanta Braves and Houston Astros, but you also have the NBA getting started. You got the NFL and college football in full swing right now. Get all the latest news, odds, and info for all your sporting needs, including MLB, NBA, NHL, and all your UFC MMA action. For the next pitch, head on over to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore, as this is your chance to get in on the action. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use our promo code LOCKEDON. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. So something I talked about coming into the series is my biggest key for this entire series are early runs. I think a lot of these games are going to be won in the early going. We've seen that through the first two games that, whoever's gotten that early lead, big early lead, has been able to hold on and really just ride that out. I think that's going to be what you see a lot in this series. And so far, we haven't seen a counterpunch by either team in these first two games. You certainly didn't see one by the Braves in this game. They had some opportunities to tack on runs and, kind of chip away to get back into it, but never really had that, big threat like 2 on or bases loaded or anything like that. It was a runner here, a runner there. They did have 2 on with 2 outs in the first inning, and Soler got a hanger that I can't believe he missed, but very easily could have been a 3-run homer. That was a big swing in that first inning. I mean, the Braves had a chance to strike first again, and Soler just missed that. Dansby singled after TDA's home run in the second inning, and then Eddie lined out to first, a ball that he struck really hard. Ozzie did the same thing later in the game with a runner at first, and Gurriel was able to snag that as well. So a couple unfortunate outs there. And then they had a 1-out double by Soler in the 6th inning, and he ends up stranded. And then you had a 1-out walk by Dansby in the 7th inning, and nothing came of that. So again, no real big threats by the offense after falling behind early. And what was the biggest swing in the game for me? Obviously, the 4-run second inning was, the big swing in the Astros' favor in this game. But what really happened after that when the Braves came up to the bat really just decided the game for me, because, you have some of the unfortunate events of that second inning and they put up a 4 spot. But then the Braves had Freddie coming up, Ozzie, and Riley, and they go down just like that. I mean, in the blink of an eye, and there's really no threat. And to me, that was the game. I mean, the Braves, if they were going to fight back in this game, they could have done it right there with their best hitters coming up to the plate. And I mean, just the quickest of innings all night. And that really just set the tone. It allowed Urquidy to kind of settle down after that, and he's able to give the Astros 5 big innings there. And you have to tip your hat to Urquidy. He worked the edges of the zone really well. Got some favorable calls, as has been the case against the Braves all postseason. But ultimately, he did a great job. Kept the Braves hitters off balance with that changeup. He was able to give his team some big innings. Dusty Baker desperately needed that after they had to use a lot of the bullpen in Game 1 as well. Also, just too many strikeouts for this Braves offense, especially early on, against Urquidy, who, isn't the biggest of strikeout pitchers, but he had 7 strikeouts in 5 innings. The Braves offense had 12 strikeouts overall. Really too many strikeouts. I think you could chalk some of that up to just being unfamiliar with some of these pitchers, but hopefully as they get more familiar with them as the series goes on, that'll get a little bit better. But, you talk about the contrast is that the Astros in that second inning, they put the ball in play. They weren't great hits. Like I talked about, they were balls that just snuck through, but that's what happens when you can put the ball in play and put pressure on the defense. And the Astros were able to do that in this game, and the Braves weren't. And that ultimately was the difference in this game too. But the series shifts back to Atlanta. Like I said, the Braves did what they needed to do in Houston. They split these first two games. So, they did their job on the road. And now they go back to Atlanta. They'll have Ian Anderson in game 3 going up against Luis Garcia. So, hopefully they'll continue the good momentum they've had in Truist Park all postseason. I feel really good about the Braves' chances back at home to take at least 2 of 3. That's kind of was my formula for the beginning, was the Braves to split 2 of 3 in Houston, win 2 of 3 in Atlanta, and then you have 2 opportunities back in Houston to close out the series. So they're still on schedule for that. But again, they take care of business in Houston. You hate how things went in game 2 because it just was a lopsided win. There really was no fight from the offense after the early going there. But still, I think the Braves are in pretty good shape going forward. We'll have to see what happens in game 4 and 5 without Charlie Morton now. That's certainly going to be huge. But one thing to mention, they did bring up Tucker Davidson. That's who they called up to replace Charlie Morton. So we'll see if he pitches significant innings in game 4 and 5. How much rust does he have? He did get a rehab outing at the end of October, but hasn't really pitched in a meaningful game since then. So don't know how much to expect of him. But Braves drop game 2, 7-2. The series all tied up at 1 as we go back to Atlanta. That will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Follow me at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.